says, it says that we are back in Exodus, and the same passage we were last week, except it was a much too long one for one, and I gave Warren the opportunity that I could actually let him run, and I would finish it up. And so there's a couple things we covered a little bit quickly and so forth. But one of the things I did tell you was I didn't have a title. And it was kind of tough because there were so many titles that would fit. Now, we're obviously in Exodus. We're talking about Moses. Moses wrote a big chunk of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And there's also a prayer from Moses in Psalm chapter 90. So you could say, hey, he got his fingers in the Psalms as well and wrote something there. And he obviously wrote it under divine inspiration. But more than anybody else, Moses was the guy that walked with God like all the time. And so in different times you might hear of people having a deep relationship, but Moses could actually go to him, and when he was frustrated, he'd almost mouth off to God. Now, word of warning, most of us wouldn't want to mouth off to God because we recognize him as God. But Moses' relationship was such that when he did so, you kind of got a pass, if you will. So when we finished a couple of weeks ago, Moses wanted to quit. He certainly didn't want to go pull any people out of Egypt. He was very, very discouraged, and so all the titles that I came up with for that was how to give an effective pep talk. And that, again, God showed great mercy when he was talking to Moses. Encouragement 101 would have been another one. A little bit further, when Moses just said, I'm the wrong guy, we had some ideas, and so it came up with God won't take no for an answer. And lastly, God doesn't accept resignations. And all of those are true to a great extent even for us. But anyway, he's not the guy. He didn't want to be the guy, and so that's where we ended up at. Today I could have said something like, get back in the game. We're getting to the end of the season. We're seeing a lot of football games and everything. We know that coaches will always tell their players when they want to come out or they're discouraged or they did a bad play, he says, go get back in that game. And I was going to use that, but I thought it was real inappropriate to call God coach, because I've never considered him as a coach. And to tell him, hey, it's God coaching us and telling Moses in particular to get back in the game, it just didn't fit. So we call it part 2. And that way it's pretty simple. Okay. So just a real quick recap. In Exodus chapter 5, verse 2, Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh. And Aaron, of course, is his brother. He also has a sister called Miriam. She's going to play a part in this whole Exodus idea in a little bit, in a few more chapters, if you will. But Aaron is the mouthpiece, because one of the excuses Moses was using was, hey, I don't talk too good. And God had a reply to that. Well, we'll send your brother Aaron with you. So with that, he kind of nixed that deal. Now, Moses continued to come up with some good excuses, if you will. Good excuses that some of us have probably used at some point. But Moses was a guy that was brought up in Egypt, and he was very eloquent. According to Scripture, and when the Apostle Stephen was stoned, right beforehand, he gave a very long testimony. One of the things he did say was that Moses was brought up in the Pharaoh's household, and he had much wisdom, and he spoke really well. So something obviously changed. Anyway, we have a situation here now where Pharaoh's saying, who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. So he states his case very well, plain Egyptian. Everybody understands it. And as an added bonus, because he's a little frustrated with the whole thing, he says, why take the people from the work? Maybe they have too much time on their hands, in so many words. And since they seemingly have too much time, I'm going to come up with a new requirement here. They've always had somebody to deliver to them all the straw that they make for bricks. I'm now going to make them pick their own straw, go around and gather it wherever they can find it, and they're going to have to do that. That should keep them busy. Maybe they'll get their mind off this idea that they want to go out to the wilderness and worship God for 3 days. So the taskmasters, and those are the Israelites that actually have reigned, if you will. They're kind of the productivity managers, if you will, of the slaves. And they go to Moses and Aaron and they say, you have made and they have put a sword in their hand to kill us. So they're obviously pretty upset with the fact that Moses is even doing this talk. Right now, yeah, they've been crying out because of their oppression and everything, but now Moses is actually making it worse, and now we know why Moses was just a little bit upset. And that's just the beginning. So then Moses turns to the Lord, and this is in verse 22. Moses turns to the Lord and he says, "Why have you done this evil to this people?" He's accusing God of being the person that carried out this evil to this people. Not even my people, this people. Why did you send me? So he suffers from real short-term memory, if you will, because God's already gone through all of this. And God also told him, he's not going to let you go. Okay? Go tell him all of this, but he's not going to let you go. They heard it. And yet they somehow thought, remembered very little of that. They didn't really know how to do that. Now, verse 23 goes on and says, "For since I came to Pharaoh," and this is Moses speaking to God, "since I came to Pharaoh to speak in his name, he has done evil to this people." And that's what Pharaoh has done to this people. And again, it's this people, not my people, not my brothers or anything like that, this people. "And you have not," and he's talking to God, "and you have not delivered your people at all." He doesn't like the way God's going about things. And so God is big enough, even with all of that, to handle our frustrations. He doesn't turn on us, fortunately, when we feel a little bit down in the mouth and we get this idea that maybe God's to blame. We may not verbalize that. We might not tell anybody that. But we're thinking, somehow God maybe has shortchanged me in some area. And those type of frustrations obviously bubble to the top sometimes in our relationship with the Lord. It may not be overt. We just may think, man, that just isn't fair. Why do they seemingly have it all together and I've got these issues going on? So anyway, chapter 5 ends in Moses' utter discouragement, and he's just gone through this round of playing the blame game with God. Now, God responds to Moses in Exodus 6:1, and he says, "But then the Lord said to Moses, 'Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand, that is Pharaoh, will send them out,'" and that is the Israelites. He's going to send the Israelites out with a strong hand. So the strong hand Pharaoh's going to use, and he's going to drive the Israelites out of Egypt. And it says he's going to drive them out of his land. Now, that's not the response we would have expected from God, because, again, Moses just uttered some difficult words that we would not necessarily say, let's blame God for a lot of this. And you might expect somebody to say, "Moses, I'm done with you. I got the wrong guy, obviously. As a matter of fact, why don't you go back to the wilderness and continue to go tend your father-in-law's sheep?" And again, remember that sheep herders were the lowest common denominator, the lowest percentage